Hello, I'm Stefanie Dekker and welcome to the stream. Why did we start 2026 by posting about what we were doing 10 years ago? The 2016 trend was on everybody's feed. But why? Was it a special year, or does it have more to do with how we feel about today and tomorrow?
It's been 10 years since 2016. Let's go back into the time machine.
Why is everyone under a 2016 spell right now? Like, who started this?
Everything is so bad that people are reminiscing about 2016.
Or is it just because we're growing up and getting older and things feel a little less communal since 2020 and time felt slower back then? Are we just afraid of what's going to be coming in the future?
In January, more than 55 million videos were created using TikTok's 2016 trend filter. It was everywhere. Instagram was flooded with people sharing memories from that year. I actually considered doing the same, but covering the war against ISIL didn't really fit the vibe check. Now, this show is going to be part of a series where we look back at what's been happening over the last decade, and we'll be taking the 2016 trend and digging deeper into the societal changes that have happened since then. Now, to discuss all of this, we are joined by Joel Marlin-Arson, a social media strategist and founder of Coldest Creative, advising global brands on how to become culturally relevant. He's joining us from London. And we have Louisa Munch, a writer, university educator, and public commentator working at the intersection of critical theory and contemporary politics. And she is joining us from Manchester. Thank you both for coming on the stream. It's a really interesting topic. Joel, the 2016 trend, we want to use it to dig a little deeper about what's really going on with us. You seem to have predicted this last year. Where did it come from?
It started with Gen Z, especially on TikTok. I was noticing a real shift in brands and social media influencers posting TikTok content with the 2016 filter. For those that don't know, 2016 photos on Instagram tended to have a pink hue, and there was a real uplift in people recreating that look for some reason and reminiscing on being an influencer back in 2016. And ever since then, it's been growing in popularity.
Louisa, I almost feel like you have a bit of that filter on your camera shot. You have a PhD in nostalgia. I love that. I think that's fascinating. Now, help me understand, 2016, is it about that particular year? Why aren't we seeing, why didn't we talk about this in 2025 and it was 2015? Is it about the year, or is it about something bigger?
Well, I think this is a really interesting cultural shift, because it's not very common for young people, especially Gen Zers, to be nostalgic. It's all about the future. When you're young, there is an optimism about the future. And I think this kind of cultural nostalgia that we're seeing on social media is speaking to a kind of loss of progress or a loss of the future. Gen Z have generally been a generation that has just seen more and more loss, economic downturn. They're struggling more than any other generation, really, in living memory. And I think that really speaks to this initiative to look back rather than forward in culture.
You're talking about Gen Z there, and that's oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just to add to that, what's really interesting about the 2016 nostalgia trend is it started with Gen Z, but as it's grown in popularity, you're seeing millennials and Gen X popping up, saying that they had a different perception of the year. And it's exposed this Mandela effect where different generations perceive that period in time completely differently.
Yeah, absolutely. That leads perfectly actually to the clip that we want to play, because is everybody talking about it? Is everyone nostalgic for 2016, or is it only Gen Z? Because it seems some millennials disagree.
This is young people experiencing their first hit of like their first wave of nostalgia. They're like, oh, it's 10 years ago. Why was life so good in 2016? Wait until like the decades roll past. The year we need to be romanticizing right now is 2006. That was the millennial peak. That personally was my peak. And stuff was actually different back then. I'm sorry, but like my Freeview box, I think I got in 2016. This just isn't enough time. Like 2016 was honestly just like a couple of Botox appointments ago.
So, Joel, you touched on it there. Is it a generational thing? Is the common theme here yearning for something that we no longer have? Is 2016 significant? Because we're going to play a couple of other clips later as well. Some say it was a great year, others don't think it was a great year.
Nostalgia has always worked in cycles. So there, before Gen Z and their 2016 nostalgia, there was the resurgence of Y2K fashion and music and the brands that dominated that era. But what's most interesting is that if you think back to 2016, we weren't so chronically online. We weren't concerned about whether AI content was real or not. And if you think about how technology has evolved, the screen time feature only was introduced in 2018 on iOS 12, I believe it was. So even back in 2016, we weren't even considering what screen time was. Today, it's a badge of honor to say that you've used your phone for less than 5 hours. So that's the version of themselves that Gen Z are really latching onto, the one that wasn't scrolling and doom scrolling as much as they were.
It has really become part of our day, hasn't it? Being on our phones. Everything also feels very curated and scripted today. Our social media feeds feel less organic than they used to. Do you agree? Listen to this.
This was before algorithms. This was before any sort of sense of optimization. There was a sense of ignorance when it came to 2016. Now in 2026, we're filled with AI slop, algorithms, Strava, self-optimization. Perhaps Gen Z is also just so terrified of being perceived and the constant scrutiny that comes with posting on social media. And you look back at 2016 when we just got to post whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. There was no photo dump formula. It was just, I'm going to post my shoes. I'm going to post me with this hat. We were free.
Louisa, do you agree with that? And as a follow-up, how would you describe nostalgia? Is it a coping mechanism? Why is it that this is coming up right now?
Well, I think this goes almost beyond social media, and nostalgia is a feeling that is predicated on loss because it's about a bitter sweetness. It's about the sweetness of something that you've lost and the bitterness of never being able to go back. And I think this pervasive culture of nostalgia that we see both on social media and in politics, you know, make America great again, take back our borders. This sort of move to let's go backwards rather than forwards is a really worrying sign that something has gone wrong in the present. And 2016 was a really significant year. Obviously, Donald Trump became the president of the United States. Brexit happened. So it really felt like a threshold moment to something that very much feels like the end for a lot of people. And this kind of loss of hope that I think is within politics and culture today.
Well, a lot of people online say that we're nostalgic about 2016 because it was the last great year when it comes to culture. Do they have a point? Have we not produced anything great after that?
Rihanna's Work, Drake's One Dance, Beyonce's Lemonade, Frank Ocean finally dropping Blonde. And then outside of that, there was Pokemon. Stranger Things premiered. Vine was still around, but that was the last year for Vine. There was Damn Daniel, Arthur's Fist. We can't forget about Harambe. Within fashion, we were wearing chokers, bomber jackets. There were the Kylie lip kits, Adidas Superstars. There was the whole Visco girl era. Felt like it was the last year of the optimistic millennial era.
Joel, do you agree with that? And you're very much into understanding trends and marketing, right? Like, I want to ask you, the 2016 trend, how does this start? Is there a company behind this? Is there a marketing company? Like, is this an organic move? I always wonder how these trends take shape.
Yes, so for the Gen Z 2016 nostalgia trend, that was really born from users on social media. Before you saw any brands that were bringing nostalgia into their content, it was all around people on social media around 20 to 30 reminiscing on 2016. And what was interesting about that is you were starting to see people reflecting their memories of living in LA and reminiscing on YouTubers that they were watching. And then the next phase of that trend was when brands got involved. So you started to see the likes of Kylie Jenner, who founded Kylie Cosmetics, one of the biggest celebrity beauty brands at the time, relaunching products that she sold out back in 2016. Those products sold out in November 2025. And that was a real signal to other brands that they should start getting involved. So as January came, you started to see Rare Beauty relaunching products and promoting new products with Selena Gomez, bringing pictures out of their archives. And as soon as you saw the likes of Kim Kardashian and the OG of the celebrity brand figures coming up, that was when other brands really started to see this as a signal to get involved.
And it's interesting because 2016, as we were mentioning, okay, some people say it was the last sort of great cultural moment, but others actually didn't like that year at all.
I've never known a year where at the time people were like, maybe this is the worst year ever. Of course, we then had like 2020 and the COVID years where everyone was like, this sucks. But like 2016 was the first time I remember on the ground in the moment, everyone being like, this year feels really negative, because we started the year with David Bowie dying. We also had a few small things like Donald Trump becoming the president, creating the decade of Trump we've had to go through. Brexit happened. The internet got way darker. We saw people from like 4chan and the alt-right start to sort of infest the, I guess what you could call the regular internet. 2016 Twitter and 2016 Facebook really was the Wild West, because these social media platforms did not know how to deal with people acting this way. And they were like, well, we can't restrict anything anyone wants to do. So it was just absolute madness at the time.
Louisa, I want to broaden it out. You have a large following online. What are you hearing from your followers? What are people missing? What do we want?
I think that's a really good question. And my social media is basically on politics and theory and trying to speak to the feelings within society today. And I think people really struggle to be able to do that. We know that something has gone wrong, but we don't quite have the words to be able to really narrativize that. And I think this nostalgia trend really speaks to the lack of narration that we have to our times. We can't seem to tell a story. The politicians can't seem to tell a story. The economists don't seem to tell a story. And, you know, I live in the UK. Keir Starmer can't seem to tell a story about our future. I think people really want direction. They really want something to be hopeful about. And when the only hope that you can find is in the past, that's really worrying, because there's only one kind of politics that is rooted in the past, and it's generally the politics of the far right.
Joel, do you agree with that? Do you feel, I guess, let me ask you this. How much does the algorithm control how we feel? Because if you didn't have a TikTok or an Instagram account, you wouldn't be aware of the 2016 trend, right? Would you be feeling nostalgic for 2016 in January?
Yes, but it would be more of an intimate experience. Again, I think the root of all of this Gen Z nostalgia is around performing. So people are performing a version of themselves and showing others what they were doing in 2016. And it's all very curated. But people are wondering, when they were back in 2016, 10 years younger, how they were so carefree, how they weren't so concerned about when they went to a restaurant, whether they needed 5 pictures that they could roll out across 5 carousel posts. It was a version of themselves that they're mourning. And still, ironically, the trend is all about how you felt less performative back in that day, but it's still being performed today.
Right, so that's where we're battling with, right? Because everything is more curated these days, isn't it, online? Like, you think about how to post, there's going to be a hook. Like you mentioned, carousels, what is the algorithm, using trending music to get more clicks? I mean, have we moved away from everything that is organic and real? Louise, I'll put that to you. Have we moved away from that and entered, I suppose, do we feel we've lost control a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think we live in a society of a spectacle now. Everything is performance. Politicians are performative. Nothing really feels quite real. And when things don't feel real, you feel like you don't have full control over them. And I think that is quite a dangerous place to be when it comes to politics. In terms of social media, it's always lent itself to this performance, and it proliferates the problem of the feeling of inauthenticity. And we really want to get back to something. We really want to get back to this authenticity and a feeling that things were real. We seem to feel like we're in a magical world where everything is just constructed through this lens. And I think this is something we really need to tackle within critical thinking and being able to understand what is authentic and what is spectacle and what is real.
The question of what is authentic, a real issue these days as well. When it comes to AI, Joel, jump in there.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting around the authenticity point is that back in 2016, there were very few brands who were curating their products around if people would share it. Nowadays, the entire business model of a restaurant and a coffee shop is how shareable is your packaging and how performable is that in an Instagram story. And that is the real evolution of this 2016 nostalgia trend. It's, I took a picture of a Starbucks cup because I thought it was fun, not because that was part of the marketing strategy.
That leads me into what I wanted to ask you as well. How are brands now latching on to these trends and selling it back to us, if you will. Is that happening?
Absolutely. The brands that have had the best success of hopping on the Gen Z nostalgia trend are those that were really culturally relevant back in 2016. So you're seeing it specifically in beauty with Kylie Jenner, one of the OG celebrity beauty brand founders, who is using this nostalgia to really bring her beauty empire back to the cultural memory that we have. And the brands that are succeeding are those that actually dominated that era, whereas those that are newer are finding it trickier to relate back to what we remember.
Louisa, the power of nostalgia, can it distort our reality? Is it because we're not feeling great now, perhaps that 10 years ago we start to sort of sugarcoat perhaps a year that might have been average? How would you describe it?
Well, I think it's quite a dangerous emotion, and it's very marketable when times are bad. Nobody is nostalgic when times are good. You know, and we haven't always been like this. We've seen the 1960s where everything was about the future, going to space, all these sort of optimistic ideas of the future. And when the future becomes just about the past, then that is a problem. And we also need to consider that this past isn't real. Nostalgia is a myth. Nostalgia is about the mythic home that we've lost. It's a homesickness, and that's really important because it's kind of ironic. We're nostalgic for authenticity, but this authentic history that we are nostalgic for isn't authentic at all.
Joel, do you think we can change where we have landed these days with the whole, I'll call it digital revolution? We've got AI that is changing faster than we can keep up with. Can we go back in time?
No, I don't think so, to be honest with you, because even with this Gen Z nostalgia trend, the content is still performative. People are performing a version of themselves that they have selectively dug out of their camera roll based on what they want to project into the world. And I feel we're going to have a second wave of nostalgia, which is actually going to be led by Gen Alpha, which is their perception of the 2020 lockdown and COVID era. And I think the real root of all of this 2016 nostalgia is it came from a generation that experienced it without any understanding of politics because they were so young, without any understanding of the negative that was happening in the world. And really, we're going to see that continue to play out just with a different time frame.
Louisa, we're talking about a young generation, right? 20, like mid to end 20s, being nostalgic, looking back at a time when really they should be excited about moving forward, about, you know, getting into their careers. You talk a lot about politics as well, the political situation, whether it's in your country or geopolitics, AI. How would you describe what is facing Gen Alpha, Gen Z these days as they embark, you know, on building their lives?
Yeah, well, we obviously live in a time of, we call it neoliberalism in academia. It's a kind of capitalism on steroids, I guess. It's a capitalism that is deeply violent to the working classes. Everybody knows we're living in a cost of living crisis. It's very difficult to get an appointment at the doctors. It's even worse if you live in the US. And I think this downturn of life for everybody, everywhere, due to an economic system is what's manifesting in culture. This sense of loss, this sense of nostalgia is all about wanting something that Gen Z probably never had, you know. And since the 1970s, I think, is where this economic downturn began. And it's also a sense of powerlessness. When people feel powerless, they will return to old gender roles or social orders. The trad wife is a really good example of this, and this is also a big TikTok trend. So I think this is way beyond just a 2016 nostalgia trend, but a huge cultural shift.
Joel, do you think this has a lot to do with the fact that so many are living their lives online? You know, you do something, you have to post it. You can't just enjoy the moment. Like, did it happen if you don't post it? Is that feeding into, because we've been doing multiple shows touching on different elements of this, and it seems that Gen Z and Gen Alpha statistically are a very sad and depressed generation, much more than the younger generations before them. Do you think this social media and digital world has something to do with that?
Definitely. I think it's because of the evolution of social media from 2016 to 2026. So now what we're seeing is social media is a panopticon, similar to a prison where everyone is being filmed from different, or viewed from different angles, similar to a prison where people are being viewed from different angles. And there's this underlying fear from Gen Z and Gen Alpha that even when they're on social media and that's meant to be their playground, there's still some element of performance. So that's why going back to 2016 feels like safety, feels like a place that you're returning to because you know it's home. Whereas the future, as Louisa mentioned, is quite uncertain.
So, Louisa, where do we go from here? How do we fix it? The reality is that, you know, social media, our digital world is here to stay. Can we sort of manage that and have people feel better?
I feel like if I knew how to fix it, I would tell you. But it's obviously a very difficult situation, and I think it starts with me for education, critical thinking, being able to name the feelings that we see in culture, in society, and be able to understand them. Because if we don't understand them, then we do just end up in these cycles of nostalgia where we're just looking back to recreate something that we can never go back to. And I think we really need to start thinking of what kind of future we want to inhabit and how we make that happen, imagining something that's an alternative to the kind of economic system that we have now and demanding it as well.
Joel, you seem to be good at predicting online trends, right? I'm going to ask you to look into your online crystal ball and like call a couple of trends for us here on the stream, and whether, you know, there's anything that's going to signal some kind of optimism.
Well, the word optimism and future and social media, I'm trying to think of a way to correlate them. But I definitely see that Gen Alpha in the next few years will start posting content around face masks. You're going to start seeing hand sanitizer used as a prop in social media content in the same way that Gen Z were really leading the Y2K comeback in music and fashion. You're going to see that with Gen Alpha because they were alive during COVID and lockdowns, but their perception of it was very different because they were online. Some of them had just started school, so the impact wasn't as dramatic if you were a working adult. And I think the nostalgia point is going to continue to come up on social media, but the real thing is understanding when nostalgia is productive, when nostalgia is being used by brands to manipulate you into buying a specific product or to sway your mind to think that something was better than it was.
I will throw that to you, Louisa, expert on nostalgia. How much of that is being orchestrated from outside and how much of it can we control and try and turn around and, you know, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, I completely agree. I think the fact that we're being sold back to us this sense of loss without being given an alternative or a way out is really quite sinister. Obviously, the culture is just a kind of distillation of what's going on in terms of like the zeitgeist, in terms of how people are feeling. And if it's just being made into like a marketing ploy, being sold to you, then you're basically being sold your own sort of loss of the future and loss of progress. So I think rather than continuing to kind of contribute or seek this nostalgia and this feeling, we need to think of something better, something alternative, and really consider what we have lost to rebuild the future.
Joel, final thought to you. Do you agree with that? What would your advice be to, you know, those struggling with their present and not looking forward to a future?
I think it's understanding that when you're looking at 2016 and nostalgia, look at it not from what is going to look good on Instagram and as a feed and as part of your trend, but looking at what moments you remember from that point of time that you didn't post. And I think the thing that we're going to start seeing more brands and people posting about is pre-AI content. So mourning a version of themselves that wasn't asking if this is real or not.
Well, that wraps up this conversation. Joel and Louisa, thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you for watching. From me and the entire Fantastic Stream team, I'll see you soon.